On Super Bowl Sunday 2017, a bankrupt driver confronted billionaire CEO Travis Kalanick in the backseat of his own car, and the explosive dashcam tantrum triggered a $68 billion corporate mutiny. When a founder's only religion is growth at any cost, what happens when the machine runs out of enemies and turns on its creator? In secret engineering rooms in San Francisco, lines of code were already being deployed to track police officers and blind global law enforcement. In Portland, sting operations were launched to seize Uber vehicles, only for police phones to display fake ghost cars that vanished into thin air. And in a Chicago hotel suite, 5 venture capitalists drew up a secret legal execution order while their target was attending his mother's funeral. To understand how a tech platform transformed into a global paramilitary corporate engine, you have to look at the law Travis Kalanick broke on October 20, 2010. Before Uber was a household name, Travis Kalanick was a twice-failed entrepreneur carrying deep psychological scars from his earlier startups, Scour and Red Swoosh. Do you know what happens to a founder who spends 6 years sleeping on his parents' couch while fighting law firms? He becomes weaponized. In December 2008, while attending a tech conference in Paris, Kalanick and Garrett Camp couldn't find a taxi in the snow. The problem wasn't bad weather. It was a rigid municipal taxi monopoly that limited supply. Garrett Camp bought the domain UberCab.com and built the initial iPhone software. But Kalanick took the helm as CEO with a simple, terrifying thesis. Regulations were not laws, they were merely competitive moats protecting incumbent monopolies. When UberCab launched on the streets of San Francisco in mid-2010, municipal taxi operators panicked. On October 20, 2010, the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency hit Kalanick with an emergency cease and desist order. The penalty was unambiguous: $5,000 per unauthorized ride and up to 90 days in county jail for every single day the app remained operational. How did Kalanick respond to state law enforcement? He deleted the word cab from the company name, rebranded as Uber, and instructed his operational teams to ignore the regulators completely. He turned police fines into a standard operating budget expense. Wall Street took notice immediately. Bill Gurley, top partner at Benchmark Capital, saw Kalanick's illegal market entry not as a liability, but as the ultimate competitive moat. In February 2011, Benchmark spearheaded a $12 million series, an investment round into Uber. Gurley calculated that if Uber could subvert local taxi regulations before cities could adapt, the network effects would prove unassailable. The corporate operational strategy was nicknamed principled confrontation. Uber would launch secretly in a target city without regulatory authorization, flood the grid with subsidized drivers, and build massive consumer addiction within 30 days. When city councils sent inspectors to impound vehicles, Uber paid the impound fees, provided high-powered lawyers for drivers, and directed riders to send millions of pre-drafted emails to city halls. In New York City, taxi medallion values had reached an all-time peak of $1,050,000 per medallion in 2014. Thousands of working-class drivers had taken out massive mortgages to buy these official city permits. Uber bypassed medallion limits entirely using unregulated private black cars and UberX. Within 48 months, medallion prices imploded below $100,000, destroying life savings and driving dozens of veteran cab drivers into financial destruction. If you want the real story of how these economic conquests were weaponized in real time, Built and Broken exposes corporate archives like this every single week. By mid-2014, Uber raised an extraordinary $1.2 billion round at an $18 billion private market valuation. Wall Street funds poured cash into Kalanick's aggressive expansion engine. This was the face of Silicon Valley's new monarch, Travis Kalanick, photographed in custom suits, gracing magazine covers as the ultimate disruptor who crushed government bureaucracy. He established 14 explicit company values, including principled confrontation, always be hustlin' and super pumped. It was not corporate culture, it was military dogma. If the culture is toxic, but the valuation is $68 billion, does Wall Street actually care? Uber used billions in venture subsidy money to cut rider prices below cost, burning hundreds of millions of dollars each quarter to starve taxi firms and rival rideshare platforms out of existence. When Uber launched in London, local licensed black cab drivers staged massive protests, blocking Trafalgar Square. But the public response was paradoxical. Downloads of the app surged by 850% in 24 hours. By the end of 2014, Uber operated in over 250 cities across 50 countries. Kalanick bragged to investors that Uber's growth rate was completely linear and virtually indestructible. Inside company servers, operational groups began operating like covert espionage networks. They didn't just challenge local laws, they developed dedicated software to actively evade government enforcement. Travis had built the ultimate disruption machine, but to conquer the globe, he realized he didn't just need to break the law, he needed to actively blind it. In December 2014, municipal code enforcement officers in Portland, Oregon, launched a covert sting operation to seize Uber vehicles operating without city taxi permits. What happened next would lead directly to an FBI criminal inquiry. When Portland transport officers opened the Uber smartphone app, they saw dozens of black cars moving across their immediate streets. But when they attempted to request a ride, the cars vanished or drivers repeatedly canceled. The officers were standing inside a digital mirage. Uber engineers had built a secret, specialized software evasion protocol known internally as Project Greyball. Greyball harvested user data to identify municipal regulators, police officers, and code enforcement agents. Uber cross-referenced credit card details, identified phone accounts linked to government offices, and tracked device locations near City Hall buildings. Once tagged under violation of terms of service or VTOS, the officer was served a modified, fake version of the app loaded with phantom ghost cars, while real drivers were routed entirely away from the area. When local police in Paris, Portland, or Sydney attempted to impound illegal Uber vehicles, Greyball rendered law enforcement completely blind. It was corporate software deployed as a tactical stealth system against municipal government. Greyball was far from the only secret software weapon in Uber's arsenal. To monitor rival competitor Lyft, engineers developed Project Hell. By creating thousands of dummy Lyft rider accounts across key metropolitan areas, Project Hell tracked the precise locations and schedules of up to 50,000 Lyft drivers in real time. Uber identified drivers working for both companies, poached them with targeted monetary bonuses, and disrupted Lyft's driver dispatch algorithms. Uber was playing chess while its competitors thought they were running a taxi business. When foreign authorities attempted police raids on local Uber headquarters in Paris, Amsterdam, or Montreal, employees triggered a secret remote protocol called Project Ripley. The moment police walked through the front doors, IT staff in San Francisco logged off all local computers, encrypted corporate hard drives, and changed passwords, remotely leaving investigators staring at blank monitor screens. Kalanick's inner circle believed they were untouchable. Valuation reached $68 billion by mid-2016, making Uber more valuable than General Motors, Ford, or Honda. Inside the executive suite, Kalanick celebrated with tech elite and Hollywood celebrities, convinced that his aggressive tactics were simply the cost of building a global monopoly. But inside Uber's San Francisco headquarters, the hyper-combative culture was rotting from the core. On February 19, 2017, site reliability engineer Susan Fowler published a harrowing 3,000-word essay detailing systemic sexual harassment, systemic HR cover-ups, and open internal corruption.
Fowler documented how high-performing managers were shielded by HR despite rampant sexual misconduct, simply because they were driving core product metrics.
The blog post went viral globally, sparking the viral consumer movement #DeleteUber. Over 500,000 users uninstalled the app in less than 7 days. Just 2 weeks after Susan Fowler's revelations, on February 5, 2017, a dashcam video was recorded inside an Uber black vehicle on Super Bowl Sunday in San Francisco. The driver was 37-year-old Fawzi Kamal, a long-time Uber black operator who had invested nearly $100,000 into high-end passenger vehicles based on Uber's earnings promises. In the backseat was billionaire CEO Travis Kalanick, accompanied by 2 female companions. As the ride ended, Kamal turned to confront the billionaire about crashing driver rates.
Kamal looked directly into his rearview mirror and said, "You changed the whole business. You raised the standards and lowered the prices. I lost $97,000 because of you. I'm bankrupt because of you."
Instead of demonstrating empathy, Kalanick poked his finger violently in the driver's face and yelled back, "Some people don't like to take responsibility for their own shit. They blame everything in their life on somebody else." The dashcam footage was sold to Bloomberg and broadcast to tens of millions of people worldwide. It exposed the stark truth behind the platform: a billionaire CEO berating a bankrupt worker whose labor generated his fortune. If you are starting to see how hypergrowth masks catastrophic moral liability, hit subscribe now. Built and Broken breaks down these corporate meltdowns every single week. Public outrage escalated into corporate panic. Just days later, Alphabet's self-driving vehicle company Waymo filed a federal lawsuit against Uber for trade secret theft. Waymo alleged that former Google engineer Anthony Levandowski downloaded 14,000 confidential LiDAR files before resigning to found an autonomous truck company, Otto, which Uber acquired for $680 million. Uber was now facing a criminal investigation from the Department of Justice over Project Greyball, a federal trade secrets lawsuit from Waymo, and an unprecedented customer boycott. You can break the taxi monopolies, but how long can you outrun the FBI? Uber was fighting a ruthless war on all fronts, but the fatal blow wouldn't come from the police, the unions, or the competitors. It was sitting right in the backseat. By May 2017, the board of directors hired former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder to conduct an independent investigation into Uber's corporate culture and legal violations. The resulting Holder report contained 47 recommendations, including stripping Kalanick of his unbridled authority, installing independent board oversight, and terminating over 20 top executives. On May 26, 2017, tragedy struck Travis Kalanick personally. His parents were involved in a catastrophic boating accident in Fresno, California. His mother, Bonnie Kalanick, was killed, and his father was critically injured. Devastated, Kalanick took an indefinite leave of absence to mourn his mother. But inside Benchmark Capital, Partners Bill Gurley, Matt Kohler, and Peter Fenton realized this was their only window of opportunity to strip Kalanick of power. Benchmark held supervoting stock control alongside allied venture capital firms First Round Capital and Lowercase Capital. They knew as long as Kalanick remained CEO, Uber's IPO was legally dead. On June 20, 2017, Travis Kalanick was staying in a suite at the Peninsula Hotel in Chicago, attempting to draft his return strategy while mourning his mother. At 3:00 p.m., two Benchmark partners walked into his hotel suite without warning and handed Kalanick a legal document titled Taking Uber Forward. The document was an ultimatum backed by 5 of Uber's largest institutional shareholders, who controlled over 40% of voting shares. Kalanick had exactly 4 hours to execute his immediate resignation as CEO. If he refused to sign, Benchmark threatened to launch a public legal lawsuit against him in Delaware court, exposing all internal board communications and destroying his public reputation. Kalanick frantically telephoned board allies, including Arianna Huffington and Garrett Camp. But one by one, his allies admitted the truth. Wall Street had abandoned him. At 11:59 p.m. on June 20, 2017, Travis Kalanick signed his formal resignation letter. The exact same investors who funded, cheered, and profited from his ruthless culture had executed him to protect their $68 billion valuation. Benchmark Capital had turned their initial $12 million investment into over $7 billion in value, a return exceeding 50,000%. How did one founder construct a $68 billion giant only to be erased from his own creation? Here is the answer we promised you at the start of this film. Travis Kalanick didn't build Uber as a software app. He built it as an aggressive optimization algorithm designed to eliminate friction, subvert law, and crush human resistance. When government agencies were evaded, taxi cartels destroyed, and competitors subdued, the machine didn't stop. Coded purely for expansion at any cost, the corporate algorithm searched for the final remaining liability to its public market float. And that final liability was the founder himself. The algorithm identified Travis Kalanick as the primary threat to the empire's survival and ruthlessly deleted him. In August 2017, Expedia CEO Dara Khosrowshahi was hired to clean up the wreckage. Uber went public on the New York Stock Exchange in May 2019 at an initial market valuation of $82 billion. Kalanick sold all his remaining Uber shares by December 2019, netting over $5 billion in cash. He was forbidden from ever holding an executive office at the company again. Today, thousands of former taxi drivers remain in personal bankruptcy across New York, London, and Paris, carrying debts from medallion loans that will never be repaid. Fawzi Kamal still drives for rideshare platforms in San Francisco, working 12-hour shifts to manage his debts. Travis Kalanick built an algorithm designed to ruthlessly eliminate any obstacle in its path, and eventually, the algorithm identified him as the obstacle. Remember that Super Bowl Sunday backseat in San Francisco? The billionaire thought he was arguing with a driver. In reality, he was arguing with his own future. This aggressive corporate playbook was not unique to Uber. Right now, another famous Silicon Valley unicorn is using the exact same software tactics built by a founder who studied Travis Kalanick's rise. Subscribe to Built and Broken right now, and join us next week as we dismantle the next billion-dollar empire.